Hello, Tom Maguire. I'm just going to review Bill Gates' latest book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. The solutions we have and the breakthroughs we need. Now, I recently had my vaccine. Well, I say recently, I had my vaccine fairly early. I work in social care. I'm a social care consultant, so I'm in and out of care homes fairly regularly up and down the country. So I needed to have it. My wife needed to have it. So I was quite lucky. I was very lucky in that respect. Had it back in end of January, beginning of February, was it? Somewhere around then. But it was quite early anyway. My concern was that if I had this vaccine, then Bill Gates might be implanting me with some kind of, don't know, some kind of tiny little robot or something that could kind of get in and kind of control my thoughts and things. So I kind of thought after reading this book, I kind of thought to myself, actually, I listened to the audiobook actually on this occasion for this one. I kind of thought, I wonder if that's why I chose this book, because he's got in there and he's kind of manipulating me. And then I just thought, what a load of bollocks. But anyway, obviously, if you follow this channel, you know that I'm not a nutcase. I'm pro the vaccine and everything else. I look at these billionaires like Bill Gates. Bill Gates is the billionaire, isn't he? He's been there for years, basically. He was the richest man in the world for a long time. He's always been 2, 3, 4, 1, whatever, somewhere thereabouts. You've got Elon Musk now, and of course Jeff Bezos as well, and all those people. Who's the other one? Warren Buffett, of course. He's been there or thereabouts for a long time as well. And I kind of see them a little bit as superheroes. I sort of think, Elon Musk, they always say about Iron Man, don't they? They say that he's like Iron Man. He's there kind of plotting and into all of his technology and things. And I tend to think that if Elon Musk is Iron Man, then Bill Gates must be Superman, I think. He's that Clark Kent sort of type, isn't he? And Superman was actually my favourite growing up, and people used to say, "Oh no, Superman's boring though because he's invincible and he doesn't have any weaknesses and stuff." And to me, that was kind of the appeal. I used to think that was why I wanted to be Superman growing up, because he was just so strong in every area. I just thought that was fantastic. Then I kind of grew up and got older and realised how flawed we are as humans, and I got probably a bit more drawn towards the Batman and stuff like that, I suppose. His more human kind of side, but I still think Superman's the best. So I've got Bill Gates as Superman, I think. Yeah, what would Bezos be? Would he be like Lex Luthor, or like, what would he be? Yeah, I said Bezos was maybe like a bit of a disappointing Batman or something. He's a bit like Keaton, isn't he? Maybe, possibly. Is he? Don't know. Anyway, whatever. Let's go back to the book review. So of course, I've read a few of these books. I've read a few books about the threat of global warming. I did David Attenborough's one just recently. I've read a couple of others. Taming the Four Horsemen by Robin Hanbury-Tennyson. I think maybe Bill Gates might have read that one actually, because there's a few connections between the two, which is quite interesting, so check that one out. That's not a very well-known book, but it's worth having a look at. I'm not ashamed to give that one a bit of a plug. I think that deserves a bit of help. It's good, that one. So Bill and Melinda, they've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They do a lot of good. I think as far as the public go, if you don't really know that much about our world's richest people, then at least I think Bill at least comes across like he has his heart in the right place, like he at least wants to try and give something back. Like, you can say whatever you like about, I'm sure he invests in things that are likely to make him more money in the future. You don't become that rich without being driven continuously. So I'm sure he's got his eye on the prize still. But I also think, I like to think, and perhaps I'm being naive here, but I don't think I am. I like to think that when you become that successful, there's going to be a certain amount of guilt to a certain extent. But if there isn't guilt, then you're at least going to want to try and be remembered for something good, I think. It's all very well making loads of money, but if you're kind of remembered as just being someone who's kind of greedy and able to make money, that isn't necessarily the greatest thing. Whereas if you can be remembered as someone who made a difference to humanity, made a difference to the planet, I think that although that's maybe arguably ego driven, that's kind of the best type of ego driven stuff, really. If you manage to give something back and improve the planet in some way, improve humanity, I think that's really good. There's a lot of arguments that these people shouldn't have as much power as they do. Bill Gates has huge power and control, really. Maybe he doesn't have as much as he would like in terms of controlling global warming and things, and maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe if he had more power to do good around global warming, maybe we'd be better off, perhaps. But lots of people would argue that these people shouldn't have as much control as they do. Lots of billionaires, Bill Gates included at the minute, are buying up loads of land at the minute, loads of farmland, which seems quite interesting, and there's probably something to do a little bit of research on. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that at the minute. But it does make you wonder, and I'm sure he's well aware of how things are going to, or more likely to turn out, and I'm sure he's ready to kind of put up wind farms, invest in nuclear power, all that sort of stuff, whatever it is that he needs to invest in that's more likely to... I think there's no doubt that he wants green power to work and to avoid a climate disaster. Surely it's in everyone's interest to avoid that, surely. But I think he's clever enough to have his money in the right place as well. And that's fine, I don't have a problem with that. He mentions the fantastic book Factfulness, strategically placed behind me by my ear there. And I tend to put that there because I tend to have my Skype meetings from this room. It makes me look intelligent. I have Factfulness in the background. I've never read it before. No, I have actually, to be fair. I have read it. It's a fantastic book. I've never done a review on it. I just never got around to doing a review on this one. But I found this one in Waterstones, which is the main sort of bookshop store in Britain. It's lovely. It's a really nice hardback version of it. I think it won some kind of award for how lovely it is, for most beautiful book or something. But by Hans Rosling, it's absolutely lovely, and Bill Gates loves this. In fact, that's why I read this book, actually, because Bill Gates recommended it. And it's really, really, really good. Read that one when you get a chance. I'll probably do a review at some point, but I think there are plenty of reviews on YouTube already, so whether I need to or not, we'll see. But anyway, that's a good one. He recommends that. And he's kind of making the point that there is a lot right with the world. Hans Rosling in this book is making the point there is a lot right with the world. It isn't as bad as we think. All this doom and gloom from the media, from newspapers, all this doom and gloom, it isn't necessarily true. The bad news stands out, doesn't it? We know that from personal development, that the bad stuff stands out much more than the good. We're more likely to be scared of the bad stuff and try and avoid the bad stuff than we are to try and do the good stuff, because it's more of a threat. It's something we're wired and programmed to avoid that stuff and to feel scared. And he makes the point that we are so much further on than we used to be, basically. So much better off than we used to be in so many different ways. So that's really interesting. It sounds really basic, but there's a lot more to it than that. Basically, he's just talking about the fact that we just need to not use less energy, actually. We need to carry on using energy because poor countries need to become richer. They need to get themselves out of poverty, and they need energy to do that. It's the way we generate that energy that's important. So it's not about stopping using energy. It's about finding ways to produce it cleanly, so zero carbon. He admits quite early on that he's got a huge carbon footprint with flying private jets to get around. He doesn't particularly kind of go much further than that to kind of give his kind of excuses for it. But I guess basically what he's saying is that's how I get around. I'm trying to do good. I'm trying to do my work. And actually, I kind of get it. When you've got that much money, you need to get here and there as efficiently, as quickly, as comfortably as possible so that you can do whatever it is you do. And I suppose you have to be confident enough to say, look, it takes what it takes for me to do what I do. You either trust me and put a certain amount of faith in me, or you don't, I suppose. And I kind of get that to an extent. Anyway, he admits that, and that's absolutely fine. Talks about the fact that when it was the time of the dinosaurs, temperatures were about 4 or 5 degrees higher than they are today. And north of the Arctic Circle, there were crocodiles living and things like that. And obviously that was millions of years ago. The last ice age, which wasn't as long ago as we tend to think, was 6 degrees less as well. He talks a lot about electrofuels, which is really interesting. I did a small bit of research on that. That's worth researching yourself if you get a chance. So the idea that they're making kind of synthetic fuels now from... We've been able to make synthetic fuels since the Second World War. The Germans made them, but they would have burnt kind of coal and things to make them. Whereas the idea is if you can make synthetic fuels from green energy, say from wind energy, from hydropower, whatever it is, whatever green energy, zero carbon energy you're going to use, if you can then make synthetic fuels, then that's, you can then carry on running cars that run on those kind of fuels and whatever else. So that's very, very interesting. I really found that interesting. And I find that interesting because I'm quite passionate about engines. I'm quite passionate about the internal combustion engine. I'm passionate about cars, bikes, anything fast and noisy, powerful. I fly light aircraft, which, by the way, aren't particularly polluting. They're only about as polluting as a car. And he makes the point that cars aren't actually that significant in terms of their carbon, the pollution that they give, particularly. He says that actually it's largely it's beef. It's the ground that gets destroyed to what's the word I'm looking for? Hold cows, basically, for farmland. And cows, obviously, with the meat, is it methane? The methane they give off from burping and farting, and that causes methane for its size or whatever, its quantity is that much worse than carbon. This is all stuff I'm sure a lot of you know already, but it's just very interesting, the detail that he goes into. So he's calculated that we need to remove 51 billion tonnes of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere every year, apparently. And he reckons that failing to do that would cost more than 1.5 million lives, like the amount already lost to COVID-19, and could cause, he calculates, 5 times more deaths than the Spanish flu a century ago, okay? It seemed to me from this, once I'd finished this book, I kind of thought, yeah, there's some really positive stuff in there, but it did feel a little bit like, how likely are we to do that though? He kind of talks quite confidently, like he knows that these things can happen, but I'm just not sure how much faith I have in human nature. I hope we would be sensible enough to sort of come together and want to do that, but it's hard, isn't it, to imagine these poor countries kind of giving anything up, or even the more wealthy countries giving things up, or changing, or taking a risk. And that's kind of the biggest thing he sort of says, really, is we need innovation, we need entrepreneurship to kind of try things and fail and try again and learn. It's like I've said before, with nuclear power just got written off because people were scared of it, and actually it's been left in the dark ages because we haven't been trying with it and failing and trying. And nuclear power, he says, as I've said before in different reviews, nuclear power is responsible for less deaths than just about anything. There are hardly any deaths at all linked to nuclear power when you look at the statistics. It's a bit like having a plane crash over a car crash, isn't it? You tend to think, oh my God, it'd be so much more frightening to go in a plane, and I'm sure it would be if you knew it was coming. But you're far, far more likely to be killed in a car. Yet we don't sort of see it that way, which is interesting, I think. So he also talks about geoengineering. He talks about making clouds brighter so that with salt spray so that they can reflect the sun. And I quite like the idea of that, controlling the weather, because that's what Robin Harry Tennyson talks about in his book. So I quite like that. Taming the Four Horsemen. So yeah, what else do I say about it? There's loads of stuff. He goes into the proper detail, basically, about what it is that's causing the problem. Some really interesting ideas of what we can do to get on top of it. You know, his intelligent, considered opinion on things. But it is very scary. It's like Attenborough's book that I reviewed just recently. It is quite frightening. It does just feel as though we're very rapidly running out of time, if we haven't kind of run out already, really. It is quite frightening. And he talks about the sort of political difficulties that we're going to come up against, that we are coming up against. But yeah, I just think it's an important read, or an important listen. My only criticism right at the end of this review would be that with the audiobook, he himself, Bill Gates, does the introduction, which is really good, but then some other guy takes over. And to be fair, there's nothing wrong with the other guy. He's a very professional narrator, I would say. But I would rather have listened to Bill Gates the whole way through. I know Bill Gates, probably his voice maybe grates on people a little bit because he's a little bit kind of, not squeaky, but he's got quite a distinct kind of voice, isn't he, in a way? It reminds me a little bit of Jordan Peterson in that kind of Kermit kind of style, in a way. But I actually really like his voice once I've heard him for a little while, and he is very, it's him. So personally, I would have liked him to read the whole book to me, personally. But maybe he was just being clever and realised that it would be more popular if it wasn't read by him as well, potentially. I don't know. The guy who reads it is just a bit generic sounding and a bit... For such a serious book, he doesn't perhaps sound serious enough to me. I don't want it to sound dry and boring, but he just sort of kind of sounded a bit like, yeah, you know, this one time at band camp, it was a bit like that the whole time. A little bit like George Clooney on kind of acid or something. But yeah, good, really good book. I definitely recommend this one. I always recommend, when it comes to our personal development, getting on top of understanding what's going on with the world. It's no good developing yourself and becoming successful and becoming rich and achieving all these goals we want to achieve if we're going to leave the planet to our kids and our grandkids that is basically just a wreck. I mean, what a waste, just what a complete and utter waste of time that would be. Oh yeah, my grandfather was hugely successful, but he was a greedy so-and-so who left the world in a complete state, and that's why we're about to die out. It's like, no, we can do better than that. So, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates, another really good book. I think Bill Gates is great personally. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know him, but my impression is that I think he's pretty good. I've always found him quite an impressive guy. Very interesting, and good luck to him, I think, as long as his heart is in the right place. I think it is. Yeah, really good book. Highly recommend it. Keep liking, subscribing. Speak again soon. Cheers.